100 years ago, chicken was a luxury. It was the thing you ate on a Sunday or when someone important came to dinner. Today it is the most eaten meat on the planet, and it is often the cheapest thing in the entire meat aisle. That reversal did not happen by accident. It is the result of one of the most aggressive engineering projects ever aimed at a living animal. To understand how strange this is, picture a farm in the 1920s. Chickens were kept in the yard and they were mainly there for eggs. Meat was almost a byproduct. You ate the old hens once they stopped laying and the surplus roosters. These were dual-purpose birds, not specialists, and they grew slowly on whatever they could scratch up plus some scraps. Raising one to a decent size took months. When an American politician famously promised a chicken in every pot, that was a promise of prosperity precisely because chicken was not something ordinary families ate casually. Beef and pork were the everyday meats. Chicken was the treat. The turning point came in the late 1940s with a competition. The idea was blunt: find a chicken that grows into a big, meaty bird as fast and as cheaply as possible. Breeders from across the country entered birds, and the winners were crossed, refined, and multiplied. It sounds almost quaint, but it set the direction for the entire industry. From that point on, chickens stopped being generalists. Breeding split into two completely separate lines that no longer resembled each other. Layers, bred purely to produce eggs, and broilers, bred purely to grow meat fast. Every commercial chicken you have ever eaten is the descendant of that decision. What followed is one of the most dramatic transformations in the history of domesticated animals, and researchers have measured it precisely by raising old genetic strains alongside modern ones on identical feed. A 1957 bird and a 2005 bird fed exactly the same diet, grow into almost different species. Over that period, broiler growth rate increased by more than 400%. In the 1950s, a broiler at 6 weeks old weighed roughly half a kilogram. Today, a bird the same age can weigh several times that. Chickens that once took around 70 days to reach market weight now get there in about 47, and some strains hit slaughter weight in as little as 35 days. That is roughly half the time it took in 1948. But the number that really explains chicken's dominance is one most people have never heard of: feed conversion ratio. It simply measures how many kilograms of feed it takes to add 1 kilogram of body weight. Lower is better. In 1957, a broiler needed about 2.88 kilograms of feed for every kilogram it gained over its first 6 weeks. By 1978, that had dropped to 1.9. By 2005, it was down to about 1.67. In other words, the modern bird converts feed into meat nearly twice as efficiently as its ancestor. Every point of improvement there ripples straight through to the price on the shelf, because feed is the single biggest cost in raising any animal. It's worth understanding how a change this large was achieved, because there is no single dramatic invention behind it. It is compounding. Breeders keep enormous pedigree flocks and measure everything: growth rate, feed intake, breast yield, leg strength, survivability, egg output in the parent birds. Each generation, only the very best performers are selected to breed the next. Because a chicken goes from egg to breeding age in months rather than years, you can stack those generations far faster than you ever could with cattle. A few percent improvement per year sounds modest, but run it relentlessly for 6 decades, and you get a 400% change. Sitting at the very top of this pyramid is a tiny number of primary breeding companies. The genetics of nearly every commercial broiler on Earth trace back to a handful of them. Breeders were not only selecting for speed, they were selecting for shape because the market wanted one specific cut. As boneless, skinless breast fillets became the default way people bought chicken, the value of a bird shifted heavily onto that single muscle. So selection pushed hard in that direction, and breast size increased by around 80% between the 1950s and the mid-2000s. This is why a modern chicken looks different from an old photograph of one. It is not merely bigger, it is a different silhouette, front-heavy with a vastly enlarged breast. That change has consequences for how the bird carries itself and moves, and it is one of the clearest examples anywhere of consumer preference physically reshaping an animal. This is exactly where chicken pulls away from every other kind of meat. Cattle are ruminants, and they spend a great deal of energy simply maintaining a large, warm body and running a complex digestive system. It takes many kilograms of feed to add 1 kilogram of beef. Pigs sit somewhere in the middle. Chickens are small, they are short-lived. They do not waste energy staying warm because the barn does that for them, and they have been ruthlessly selected for exactly one job. The result is that chicken is simply the cheapest way we know to turn grain into animal protein. And once something becomes the cheapest, in a world where most people buy food on price, the rest tends to follow automatically. Genetics alone would not have been enough. The industry rebuilt everything around the animal. Modern broilers live in long, climate-controlled houses where temperature, ventilation, humidity, and lighting are managed continuously. Feed and water run the length of the building on automated lines, so a bird never walks far to eat. The diet is formulated to the bird's exact age, changing as it grows. Barns are cleaned between flocks, and visitors are restricted for biosecurity, because a disease outbreak in a house holding tens of thousands of birds is catastrophic. None of this is farming in the traditional, weather-beaten sense. It is closer to running a very precise, very biological production line. There is another piece that is invisible from the supermarket, and it is about who owns what. In much of the industry, the farmer does not own the birds at all. A single integrated company owns the breeding stock, the hatchery, the feed mill, and the processing plant. It delivers day-old chicks to a farmer, delivers the feed, specifies exactly how the birds must be housed and managed, and collects them again at the end. The farmer supplies the buildings, the labor, and the utilities, takes on the debt for those buildings, and is paid per bird raised. This vertical integration is a huge part of why chicken is so cheap and so consistent. Every step from egg to package sits inside one coordinated system. It also means the person doing the daily work carries much of the risk while controlling very little of the process. Put all of this together and you get an extraordinary economic result. Between about 1960 and 2004, the price of poultry rose at roughly half the rate of goods in general. Think about what that means. While almost everything else got more expensive, chicken quietly got cheaper in real terms year after year, decade after decade. In the United States, chicken consumption went from around 9 kilograms per person in 1950 to nearly 40 kilograms by 2005. It overtook beef. Worldwide, the same pattern repeated in country after country as incomes rose. Chicken became the default protein of the modern world, not because of a marketing campaign, but because it kept getting cheaper while everything else did not. Chicken also had an advantage no amount of breeding could create. It is, in religious and cultural terms, one of the least restricted meats on Earth. Pork is forbidden to a large share of the world's population. Beef is off limits or discouraged for hundreds of millions more. Chicken sits comfortably in almost every cuisine and almost every dietary tradition on the planet. When health advice began pushing people away from red meat toward leaner options, chicken was perfectly positioned again. A cheap, fast, efficient, universally acceptable protein is about as close to a guaranteed global winner as food gets. There is one more part of the story that happens nowhere near a chicken house. All that feed has to be grown. A modern broiler diet is largely corn for energy and soybean meal for protein, which means the true footprint of the chicken industry is measured in millions of hectares of cropland, often on a different continent from the birds. When chicken consumption rises in one country, demand for soy and corn rises somewhere else entirely. And that pressure has been a significant driver behind the expansion of soybean cultivation across South America. Chicken is efficient at converting feed into meat, genuinely more efficient than any other livestock, but efficient is not the same as free. The bird's real footprint is a field you will never see. It is also worth pausing on what that breeding split actually created, because it produced a strange and uncomfortable situation. Layers were bred to be small, lean, and to pour their energy into producing eggs. Broilers were bred to be large, fast-growing, and heavily muscled. They are now so specialized that a layer bird is essentially useless for meat, and a broiler is a poor egg producer. That works well for efficiency, but it created a well-known problem in the egg sector. Male chicks of laying breeds will never lay eggs and will never grow into decent meat birds, so historically they were culled shortly after hatching, on an enormous scale. Several countries are now moving to a novo-sexing technology that identifies male eggs before they hatch. And it exists precisely because that split into two hyper-specialized birds left no useful role for half the population. None of this comes free, and the bill is mostly paid by the bird. Growing that fast puts real strain on an animal. Modern broilers gain weight faster than their legs and hearts comfortably develop, and lameness and cardiovascular problems are well-documented consequences of pushing growth rate this hard. Housing tens of thousands of animals in one building also makes disease control an ongoing battle, which historically drove heavy routine antibiotic use, something many countries have since restricted over concerns about resistance. And concentrating so much of the world's protein into a single, genetically narrow bird raised in dense flocks creates a real vulnerability, as repeated avian influenza outbreaks keep demonstrating. And the curve has not flattened. The countries that drove the first wave of chicken consumption are now fairly saturated, but the growth has simply moved. As incomes rise across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, one of the first things households do is buy more animal protein, and the cheapest, fastest, least restricted option is almost always chicken. Producers follow, building the same integrated model of hatcheries, feed mills, and processing plants that was refined decades earlier elsewhere. Which means the total number of broiler chickens alive on Earth at any given moment, already measured in the tens of billions per year slaughtered, keeps climbing. Whatever you think about that, it makes the broiler one of the most numerous birds that has ever existed. And it puts the question of how these animals are bred and housed squarely at the center of any serious conversation about the future of food. Step back and the scale of what happened is genuinely hard to absorb. In under a century, humans took a slow backyard bird kept mainly for eggs and turned it into the most efficient protein converter in agricultural history. We changed its growth rate fourfold, halved the feed needed to build it, rebuilt its housing, restructured the entire business around it, and made it so cheap that it displaced meats people had eaten for thousands of years. There is a reasonable argument that the broiler chicken is the most intensively engineered animal that has ever existed, and it happened almost entirely out of public view. So the next time you pick up a pack of chicken breasts and notice how little it costs compared to almost anything else in the aisle, that price is not an accident or a special offer. It is the endpoint of 70-odd years of relentless breeding, feed science, barn engineering, and corporate coordination, all aimed at a single question: how quickly and cheaply can we turn grain into meat? The answer to that question rewrote what the world eats. It changed which animals we raise, how much land grows feed instead of food, and what a family on a modest income can reasonably expect to put on the table. Very few technologies of the last century have altered daily life for more people, and almost nobody thinks of it as a technology at all. It just looks like dinner. Follow along for more of the hidden engineering and economics behind everything on your plate.